Hello, thanks for tuning in to Everyday Data with Patricia and Zach. And this week we have a brand new segment. It is the Everyday Data Book Club. So this week we read a book, and yes, we're always reading books, but we read a book specifically for this channel. And we want to share our thoughts, feelings, and a brief discussion on how it relates to our lives and how it could relate to your lives. So, pass the microphone, pass the book off to you, Patricia. What did we read and what is this book?
Yeah, so excited to talk about today's book. Is something that I think we just kind of came upon. I think I happened to upon it in like some sort of book sale, and so I was like, "Oh, let me read this," and then forced Zach to read it with me. And so the book for this week is The Data Detective. Doo, doo, doo. And it's a book by Tim Harford. And Tim Harford, I have his bio here. He is a British economist, journalist, and broadcaster who is known for making complex economic ideas accessible to wide audiences. He writes the Undercover Economist column for the Financial Times, hosts BBC's More or Less, and obviously is the author of The Data Detective. So yeah, that's a little bit about the book and the author. And the book itself, it says 10 easy rules to make sense of statistics on its cover. So what Tim basically does is he provides like 10 rules where for individuals who are consuming statistics, whether it be in news or in books or in research, what politicians say, what your friends say, what your boss says, how do you consume the statistics that you see in your everyday, and how can you approach all of these news and all the statistics that we see all the time in a way that is thoughtful and kind of protects yourself and protects the world. There's a lot in there, but it's good stuff. So basically, it comes up with 10 rules. And I don't know, should we list out all 10 rules or not? Or no, maybe not.
Yeah, I think we'll just go as we come along. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just do that. Okay, so that's the basic of the book. And so with that, off to you, Zach. What were your initial thoughts of the book?
Yeah. So when you talked about this book, first of all, I want to say, yeah, I had already started to read it, and I DNF'd it. I returned it early. So not because it's a bad book, but yeah, I was browsing like just my local library through Libby. I came across it. I was searching just for data, right? I was like, oh, well, there's got to be some interesting books on data out there that, just to expand my mind. And so I started already. So when you brought it up, I thought, okay, this is the perfect time to actually finish the book because I just started it, but then just got off on a tangent. Not that it's bad. So, but the book itself, I found it more of a refresher and like a something that we maybe already know intrinsically as someone who works in data, but to have it spelled out for you, it really sort of, yeah, it builds on your general knowledge set to like, okay, that's a way to frame it. And I liked how he used those rules because yeah, it already these assumptions like the first rule to talk about the rules is
Yeah.
search your feelings. So you kind of know in general that you shouldn't, exaggerate to news. So he frames a lot of these examples on where we come across data that's sensationalized. Like you'll see a headline, and the first rule is search your feelings because we react as humans to the headlines. They're always written in sensationalist way. That's why it's a headline. It's X number of people lost their job to AI. It's a eye-catching headline, and the first rule: search your feelings. You're gonna react like, no way, down with AI. But then again, what I liked about the book as an overview is it gives you some other frameworks or toolkit to not just have a way to explain it as okay a gut reaction, but there's other ways to look at data. Like we'll talk about the other ones, like look at the backstory, who's missing, avoid jumping to conclusions, and these are all just kind of rules to live by. But as the title says, but we're not rules to live by, but rules to look at the world and look at data by.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I feel like the way that we approach the book is it feels kind of like common sense, but then I always think of that phrase, common sense is not so common. And I think, especially in a world where we are constantly surrounded by data and algorithms and statistics, statistics and claims and headlines, like it's more important than ever to mostly stay vigilant because I find that people tend to take one stance or the other. They're either like pure believers
Mm.
or they're just like, this is hocus pocus. Like, I'm not gonna like listen to any of it, or I don't want to take like everyone's lying. But what I like about the book is that it just encourages you to be thoughtful. Like, don't necessarily write anything off, but
Mm.
don't also blindly believe everything you read or you hear. It's like, here are some ways of thinking about when you hear a headline or when, you know, you get a statistic thrown at you. Or I really thought about it in the context of the way that I work. And, you know, we'll talk about that a little bit later about how it's going to change the way that we work. But I just found that it was, like you said, like it's like good rules to kind of live by and kind of train your common sense. It's like, and you and I talk about this a lot too. It's like, you know how we both love self-help books. So
Yes.
this kind of reminded me of how, like, when we read our self-help books, we're like, oh, I kind of already knew that, but I really needed, it's like, it's a good reminder. That's how the book felt like for me. And I feel like for you too. But I think that for a lot of people, some of these things might be like, what? I wouldn't have thought about approaching data this way.
Yeah, I think the audience for this book is already the informed, just to piggyback off that, it's already for kind of the informed citizen. So I think this, who he's writing for, I mean, him as an author, Harford, he's on, part of the opinion boards for Financial Times and BBC. So it's kind of that not mass market media. This isn't, listicles that you see on social media or
Yeah.
other like sensationalist journalism. It's more, I guess, to put it in American terms, even though he has this very British kind of, Financial Times, BBC. Like it's like a New York Times. It's like more of a people that are already the readers of that are not your, I guess like you're using your example for average. It's not the average. You're already a little bit informed, but yeah, like you said, it's that I internalized it. So as I was reading it, it all made sense. It all clicked. It's like, yes, I should know this, but it's good to put it into words. And hopefully going forward, it just kind of, yeah, like I internalize the lessons as these
Uh,
rules are as I go forward. And I question the sources, even if they do come from a New York Times, which is one of his rules, that we can't all sift through the data. So we should a little bit outsource our, verifications to reliable sources. But even then, we should question it.
yeah. And like, I feel like on the flip side of that, I also think that the people who should read this book wouldn't read this book. Like, they're, like I was in piqued by it because I was like, ooh, the data detective, like, what could this be about? Oh, like rules to make sense of statistics. And I always say this as someone who works in like data and analytics, like statistics does not just come naturally to me. So I originally thought that the book was going to help me just like become better with stats,
Yeah.
which it very much is not that book. It's just how do you respond to when you hear certain data points or claims, which is also a really great topic. And you need to know about how to approach those situations. But again, like the people that need to read this book are not going to read this book, which is so sad because as I was thinking about it, I was like naming off family members, friends who I'm like, oh man, this person really needs to read this because the amount of, man, especially on WhatsApp, the amount of messages that get forwarded that are just ridiculous claims, especially like I'm South Asian. So like in the South Asian community, I call it WhatsApp University. Like just the messages that get sent are insane. Just like crazy claims and no one's really thinking about it. It's and it, I loved his first point actually because he talks about emotions and it's like it's because these claims elicit an emotional response. People just share them without thinking.
But see, but on that point, so now, and again, I think the good part is now that you've read this, you have the tools and a way to talk about it. So I definitely see the value in like that when I think about it. Like, I can't, you can't just dismiss it like, oh, that's crazy. You're crazy. Those numbers don't make any sense. But it gives you a framework to when you confront. So, if this the target audience, someone who's like an informed data person, but when they push back against the other half of the population that's not data informed, now you have a way to talk about it. Instead of just dismissing it all right and creating like a real clash between, I'm emotionally attached to this number and no, you're crazy. That numbers is no way. But now you can say, well, what was the polling? Who was left out of the study? Are they only counting, white males when they did this polling and they didn't include any other demographics? So of course it's going to skew the numbers. And just by now that you have the language to talk about maybe some of the inconsistencies that studies or again the way the media, the news can warp the numbers by cherry picking how they conduct the studies. Now you can inform your audience on what's at university to at least think critically a little bit themselves, right? When you like refute it, I guess.
The thing with what's at university and just my family members and things, and when I was even reflecting on the book and during this conversation, I think I am that type of person. The book talks about this, is just the bias that you tend to have based on what you already understand of the world, or how you want certain statistics to kind of win over other statistics. And especially that I think the more educated you are, sometimes you tend to put yourself into a hole of, well, this is the statistic that I want to believe in, so I will go and find more information to support this statistic, and just kind of like not even take any other statistics into consideration, which I think I do with my friends and family on WhatsApp University. Like whenever I get one of those weird forwarded messages, I'm just like, oh, everyone else is so dumb. I'm the smartest person, and I will go find an article to refute this. But instead, I don't think I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I feel like I would now want to look at this claim and look at what I think should be right. Like, look for more examples, more research. Like, I feel like even just the way that I would approach the people around me who I tend to kind of overlook. I feel like I would now have like a new sense of patience with them and openness to conversation.
Yeah, it definitely, yeah, makes me question things more. And like you said, I think you can find a counterpoint for anything if you look. But yeah, but now you're questioning the source, and maybe it was a valid point again for the specific maybe audience that they're talking about in whatever statistic. Okay, that's valid for that sliver of some demographic or population, but it's or the timeline view that was a good snapshot or a good thing that was valid then. I mean, the quickest thing that comes to mind is like the job market. Like, oh yeah, it's so easy to get or computer science data is a great career, and it was valid post pandemic hiring. But if you look at it now, any of the statistics of people in the workforce or number of people hiring or number of people in position, it's skewed with numbers of maybe outside of the current real world examples of what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, like, and that's what I think I really liked about this. Is just like, I feel like it gives you these like subtle ways to reframe your thinking and your way in which you view the statistics. And I think I mean, I don't know about you, but I think with me, especially, transitioning to this career, working in a world with data and analytics a little bit more, I have learned so much and I understand so much that he gives this really good example at the end of the book of two different economists during I think it's like during the Great Depression or something, where one economist has all these predictions and it like really doubles down on them, and he ends up like losing all his money and blah, blah, blah. And then there's another economist who has his predictions. Obviously, the stock market crashed, and then he kind of adapts and changes and does things differently when it comes to his recommendations, the line of work he's in, and all of that. So I think with me, I've realized like, oh, I need to be careful not to head down the road of this economist who kind of was so confident because he had never been wrong before. Like, there was a couple of reasons why he was so confident and not willing to let go, which I think I am capable of going down that. And I can like kind of like reflecting on work and stuff, I'm like, oh man, maybe there's some times that I should have been taken a step back or been more patient. And so it's like a good way to kind of retrain your thinking.
Mhm. So that said, so speaking of retraining, so did anything in the book, like, do you have any like action items from the book? Like, is there, besides maybe, again, refuting things, like I'm thinking specifically like work related, because I maybe have an example, but I want to hear maybe what you, if you had an idea first, like, how is this going to, like, what was your takeaway or like that could implement now with like from a work lens though?
Okay, so I think there's a couple things. The first thing that I think of is uh there was a good chapter on like data visualization. First of all, I just have to say like he managed to pack so many topics into one book that's under 300 pages, and like everything from like official statistics in government to data visualization to equity in who's part of your studies to like feelings experience, like he just like everything that I feel like we spent over a year learning. He was like, here's ways to think about all of these things. So I have to give him kudos for that. So kudos to him for like literally packing. I don't, if anyone reads this, like I don't know how much information that you're getting. Like I don't know if you realize how much information you're getting in a very synthesized, easy to read kind of way with so many examples. So yeah, so I was just like very surprised by that. So first thing I would say is like obviously data visualization. I work in senior leadership, and that is the place where I think sometimes messages can be a little mixed or it can get lost, or a chart is presented and all of these other takeaways are taken from it instead of what was actually supposed to be taken away from it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my first takeaway. My second takeaway, and I have an example of this, is obviously I can't give away too much, but we were doing some analysis back in March where we got a top line number. And we were like, whoa, this number is huge. This is amazing, shocking, interesting. We got to do something about this number. And we gotta go. And we'll probably get some really big wins considering the magnitude of this number. Let's look into it a little bit further. And then, we started digging into the data. And then we found that that number broke out into like five much smaller numbers. And then we were like, oh, can we actually do anything with this at all? And so I think for me, like I know that we have this tendency to just get really excited about something. We have a headline number, we have a headline insight. And I think I tend to be this way too, where I tend to move too quickly because I just want to like get things started. Whereas with like data, you do have to take a step back. You have to ask more questions, be more curious. And so this was a good reminder for me that, it's hard to do that if you're not a person like that. Like, I'm not a patient person when it comes to work. Everybody who works with me knows that. Like, I'm just like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next big win? Where's the next result? Where's the next report? And so I think this is a good reminder that, we have to actually take a step back. And so I know that I need to change in terms of just like taking things a step back and not getting so egoistic or so attached to my data sets and the data that I'm working with, because are there any biases? Am I not taking enough time to ask all the questions or question what I've found? And so this was a really good reminder for that.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly, my favorite parts were also the data visualization parts, the later chapters with Florence. Yeah, Florence Nightingale. She was the
Yes.
nurse during the British one of the wars, and yeah, she convinced, I guess, yeah, like support for the troops because she was able to show yeah, like the real impact of what was happening in the hospitals and was able to convince leadership slash government of what was happening. But I liked, on that note, one of the examples, I think it was the Nightingale example, was how it's easy for us as humans to make comparisons, right? For example of like using like maybe your numbers example. That's what came to mind with numbers. Like, oh, this is $5 million. I don't know if it's a dollar number or like, number of donors. And that is, our salary for 6 years, like by putting in other terms that you can relate to. So where I was going with this, sorry, it's another book I read today. So I'm reading, totally out topic, In Shitification by Cory Doctorow. It's
Okay.
about tech companies and how services are being degraded, how the internet is being enshittified. But one of the examples in the chapter that why your number thing and where I'm going with this is he gave an example. He was talking about how stock buybacks are kind of like companies in shitifying because the Google example, they did like a 70, billion dollars, not a billion, but they did a large stock buyback and that would have covered the salary of everyone they laid off for like 20 years. So when you put it in, I was thinking to the book. So here's an example, maybe the book I'm reading and then the book I just read, Data Detective. When I hear that, it instantly made the connection and it makes the connection for the reader so impactful on that figure that, oh, just a company doing a buyback, a stock buyback. That's like a common, kind of like a hack almost for accounting to juice the numbers on their stock price. But when you look at it in another way, that's the salary of everyone they laid off. And they could have paid that salary for 20 years instead of doing the stock buyback to raise the stock price. So that was one of the examples I loved. And I think I'm going to, use that. So back to the data detective, how to use that in your work and things I liked. I really like the Nightingale example where she was like a pioneer of data visualizations and putting things in other relatable terms to your audience and always thinking about the audience, who you're presenting the data or who's using your dashboard. Is there a way to like when you explain things, this is like for me, like higher education, this is like, the equivalent of so many students or, six classrooms, of classes or here, and how can that be reallocated? So I really liked that example in Data Detective. And again, I'm already applying it to not just work, but like how I view other numbers anytime the numbers or statistics are, shown to me.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I was also just thinking of the other rule that I really liked was the one where he was like, okay, I'm gonna look at my notes actually. Um it was it was rule number 5, which was get the backstory.
Hmm.
So I wrote this down. It's important to look behind the statistics to see where they come from and what data may have vanished into obscurity. And I really liked that because I think you and I think you work in a lot of data visualization and I work very heavily in like insights presentations. And I feel like in that, you know, I know that I cannot think of like, oh, is there other data that's out there that I'm not considering? I don't know. Do you ever have that issue with what you're doing or the kind of work that you're with? Hi, Kitty. Do you also face that where you're like in at work and is there like data that you haven't even thought of or anything like that?
Oh, that's it. I think data I hadn't thought of, or I'm really stumped. You're like stumping me now on this one. Like I'm trying to think of an example. I
Yeah,
don't
I know
think
it's kind
that
of a tough
really.
one because
Oh.
yeah, because it's like I guess like when he was talking about it, there was like two ways. There was like, the data that we have looked at that we just aren't showing. And so I know he talked
Mm.
about that a lot, but it got me like spiraling. And I was like, well, what about all the data that we don't even like think of until later? Like, I don't know if you've had that experience or not, but there has been times where I've had that experience where, we present an insight and then someone in the room is like, well, did you look at this? And I'm just like, what? We didn't even know that existed.
I guess yeah, you have me really thinking like, is it happen? Just because the way the data, I just tangent. That's why I'm like, it was racking my brain when you said that because mostly I deal with like historical student data, so it's not
Mm,
necessarily like it's pretty well like defined, so there's not like much variation, but maybe some of that is I don't know if that's the exact rule or it's one of the maybe not the backstory or who's missing, but it's just maybe I'm looking trying to what rule fits it. Maybe it's like a premature enumeration or which is the rule 3 or the time view because
mm,
anyways it's the classification. So to get to the point, not trying to fit into a rule, but like when you say like a student, like for me like with student data, it's like okay, how do you define a student? Is it like a first time student? Is it a student with a certain like entry type? Did they enter or they
mm,
transfer? Are they continuing? Is it a new student? Like they just enrolled or do they transfer from a different school? Or, are they on a certain scholarship? Are they on a grant? There's so many ways. And when people ask for like a number, like how many students are enrolled in my class? Okay, well, what time period? What do you classify? Do you want like a cohort? So do you want like track, I started school in 2020 and graduated in that time? Do you want to see when they graduate, or do you want to know all the graduates for one specific year, which is, could be people that start early, finish late. Yeah, there's so many ways to like use like a blanket term, like how many students are enrolled in your school or how many students graduated. So it does make me, yeah, think of one of the other, yeah, like just jumping to conclusions or clarifying, which is
Yeah.
the takeaway for me is, getting better on not just clarifying, but also explaining when I present, like what assumptions I made so that
Mm,
the receiver, or if they're viewing like a static report, like know how I arrived at number and what criteria I used to get there. Like, okay, this is how, for this chart, this dashboard, I'm saying a student is, this criteria, this, all these attributes. So they know, like, okay, is that what I'm really looking for? Right.
No, I actually love the way that you did that because I what I felt with the book is that all of the rules are also interconnected.
Yeah.
So I see how even the way that I'm thinking about it from like the perspective of Rule 5 makes you think about it from the perspective of like other rules.
Yeah.
Because even when he's writing it, like he tends to refer back to a lot of the different rules in like as you're going through. So
Yeah.
I can, and I feel like that must be the goal of the book, obviously, is for you to end up getting this like very holistic
Mhm.
experience of like now when you're approaching problems or when you're approaching work or reading the news or oh my goodness, like politicians, like
Yeah.
anything that politicians say, right? Like now the whole experience of you consuming that should basically change.
Yeah. Yeah. Like which rule applies. Like, yeah, there's different ways to, like, I should be questioning this and this and this, not just one neat rule, but yeah, using the entire, toolbox of rules that are, shown in the book.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to one rule, which is the rule number 8, don't take statistical bedrock for granted. I loved this, and a couple of reasons. It's because Stats Canada was called out for
Yeah.
being
There's lots of
a
candles
great,
on the book.
yeah,
Yeah.
is called out for being like reputable, like a very reputable official data source. And I follow Stats Canada on like Instagram. I love StatsCan. Like I read all of their reports. I'm like obsessed. I use their reports to inform some of the work that I do. And so it's a topic that we don't talk about, I think, because we talk a lot about like data governance and yada, 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 but we don't talk about like there are actually some really awesome organizations out there, and especially like government funded organizations that are like trying to be nonpartisan, that are just
Mm.
trying to like get out good data for people to make informed decisions about. And I love that he called that out because I think it's so important. And also, I love StatsCan. So,
And see, it was kind of depressing reading those sections, being on the other side of the wall, not the wall, but the border, I guess. But down here in the U.S., where at the moment the government is currently shut down as of this recording, and
uh,
little reporting of numbers are, yeah, a little suspect. But yeah, it makes me definitely question and worried about that the bedrock is don't take statistical bedrock for granted. And it makes, being an informed reader now, what changed in their methodology. It also, so going forward, as we know, there's maybe some contention with the numbers when like a jobs report number doesn't look good. So did they change criteria, for unemployment? Was any of the methodology changed? Don't react to my first gut instinct of actually those numbers are good. It was the example of rule 2, ponder your personal experience, which was very interesting. In the book, the example he gives was about buses, right?
yep,
Where from his perspective as a bus rider commuting on a bus, it's always packed. But then he explains that, well, buses go in multiple directions, so everyone's maybe going to the office in the morning, but then they're empty the rest of the day until rush hour. So when you hear a number on the average, yeah, the 0 plus 100 makes 50, but his personal experience is it's always at 100 on the buses when the average over the whole system is made 50. So yeah, when these like numbers, and then yeah, like what's the criteria for like a jobs report whenever they start coming out again in the US? Again, are they counting, like what's the criteria, like what changed, if they change methodology from week to week, or administration to administration, what changed and how would that influence the numbers? Yeah, it makes me, yeah, again, the whole point of the book, think more critically and don't take anything at face value, unless it's stats canned. So, yeah.
You literally, StatsCan is perfect. Everyone should follow them on Instagram. I do feel for you because I feel like every other day on the news, it's like, oh, in the US, they're like correcting previously like
Right? Yeah.
shared data points that were found out later to be untrue. Like I know that there's just a lot going on over there. And I want to think it's easy when you come from certain countries to be like, oh man, that's never going to happen to us. But like, who like Canada is a hop, step, and a jump away from that. And I'm sure if we would have been reading this book a couple of years ago, thinking about like, he puts a couple examples of like Greece and Argentina, I'm sure that like US readers would be like, oh man, that's ridiculous. We would never do that. And then now I think you're in a situation where it's difficult to trust what statistic is real or not. But that should always be, I think the takeaway is you should always have that view now is like, is this statistic real or not? And I think it's important for everyone to, now I'm like even me, like I am a raging like liberal, right? But I think I tend to just kind of dismiss any statistic that doesn't support my agenda. But now I'm like, oh, and I know I should have always thought that, but I think it's easy to fall into like traps of society. And so now I want to, this is a good reminder to be like, no, 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 we should listen to everybody. Have there been other research papers done? How many papers have found this same finding? He shared a really good resource, I think, that actually for any like claims or findings, it will see if there's been any other research done to corroborate that. I don't remember what it was called, but the Cochrane Cooperation, was that what it is? Cochrane Cooperation, something like that. Anyways, Zach will put it here eventually, whatever it is that I was talking about. But yeah. Okay, last question that I have for you. Is there anything that you would like any critique that you have of the book?
Critique of the book. I think it was overall like, yeah, I liked it, most of it. Yeah, I think all the examples were really good. They all resonated with me, and as you said, it was very like varied. Like it kind of feel like it covered all the bases. It was a good like baseline look into statistics. And I think it accomplished what it set out to do. Like like you said, it's not a deep dive to learn statistics. It's more almost like a pop culture. So I know this is maybe before your time, but like it's like a freakonomics for the modern age, where it's pop culture economics. It's not necessarily like here's how to do stats, but it's stories and anecdotes from an economist, and yeah, like it just challenges your assumptions. So I would say, yeah, I don't really have any negative things to say at all about the book. And maybe if anything, one thing that I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind, and here's like the devil on my other shoulder, is now that I know how bias is, can I use that? Again, you could use that to juice the numbers to accomplish something, right? Like that people are going to react to a number and maybe not look at the methodology, or you could use a comparison and leave out data, and like there's almost like an evil way to use data, and it points out how to look at it. But like technically, right, you could use kind of like the tricks and put the rules for the other side, if you wanted to, yeah, like juice the numbers and look things away, or use a different statistical method, something to to influence, like, yeah, whatever you're trying to say with the numbers.
And he said that people do that, right? Like there's always going to be that side. So it looks like you're just one of them, Zach.
But at least you're aware of it. Yeah. Again, the flip side is, yes, that you're aware that that is probably happening. Like you said, that people are, cherry picking data points or time periods to fit a narrative. Because as we said at the beginning, you can probably find a statistic or make a statistic to fit any single narrative you want, whether it's, jobs reports, the economy, stock prices, any statistic as like maybe as a politician that you want, in your district, like crimes are up in the district, you've got to fund this or, defund that. There's going to be a statistic that can, mean that. But so one last point on that and on the verification, and I think maybe sort of to kind of wrap this up and to tie it into other areas again, is AI. So I think one of the interesting points that I was reading an article. I don't know if I talked about this last week or to someone else. Ethan Mollick, who's a researcher at Wharton Business School, wrote a book on AI, co-intelligence. Love it. But he was sharing, like, I think it was like a LinkedIn post or on his blog or his, Substack, Medium, whatever it was how AI can now verify. He was specifically talking about research papers. So he's a PhD
Mm.
researcher, and there's a reproducibility crisis in academia, where you'll publish a paper, and you can't, someone else can't replicate the findings, and this because there's so much published, it's hard to run the whole study again to get the actual result yourself. Like, he talked about it kind of the book. I want to verify this claim. You know, it's you have to be a statistician. You have to know R. You have to know how to even though the data set is usually included in academic papers, you have to understand the methodologies there, but you have to understand how to put it all together and run it. And where AI comes in is that it can be the bridge, right? Because AI, especially new language models, that they can do these computations, and it's so structured already. The paper lays out like, here's how we ran the experience and here's the data, that you can use AI, which of course maybe has bias too already, but it can run statistical analysis on data sets and be that third party to verify things. So I think that's maybe like a future way to look at sort of the positive maybe of this, that because we're now maybe understanding this, and as AI gets takes our jobs, and the statistics, 80% of jobs are going to be outsourced to AI. Even the job of verifying this, that we can maybe in the future, as AI gets faster and cheaper, you can just immediately say like, hey, I want to question that, let me see the source, or ask AI, can you go out and verify this? Can you look at these numbers, help me understand where it came from, what they used, and can you try and get the same numbers? And if not, right, then the AI can maybe explain to you. So if anything, I think AI. This is an opportunity for AI to do good, to be that as Hart he talks about Harford, as Harford talks about in the book, that we need to sometimes trust certain sources to do the analysis for us. In this current age, when he wrote this in what 21 something like that. So 4 years later, after ChatGPT has become this came out in 2021. So before ChatGPT was a thing, and we've already progressed so much in 4 years. Now we have large language model, and that could be. I think the original question was what I didn't like, but what could where I'm going with this? Yes, I think in the new age, you can definitely there will be things like AI that we can maybe start verifying and make us all more like informed data citizens.
Yeah, I feel like he needs to do a version two of this because I was thinking the same thing, especially because he has a chapter on algorithms.
Yeah.
And I was like, he talks about like recommender systems mostly. And I was like, man, like, I wonder what he would think of like ChatGPT and
Yeah.
just like the AI focus that's on the world right now. And he has this one quote in the book that I really like. And he basically says the world isn't just ruled by figures or feelings, it's like ruled by both.
Hmm.
And so I feel like the where it comes down to is like even with AI, even with research, with all of these things, like I think it's like a combination of both human and this, you know, the stats or the AI or the algorithms or whatever it is, like it's a combination of the two, and then being curious and questioning everything
Yep.
that's like kind of that perfect recipe for success or good
Yeah, and that's
questioning.
I mean, going on an AI tangent. That's the maybe the future. Yes, AI is going to take your job, but there's always going to be a need for, like you said, the human in the loop, right? That there's
Yeah.
going to be needs someone to look at the data critically, apply a perspective to it, maybe using the framework and the rules in this book. And, just because you ask AI outright, question what AI, chose for its methodology. Are you the human that was that the right choice? Did AI sample the right, population? So
Time to
yeah,
start learning every single algorithm and model out there so you can question all of the AI solutions.
or just ask AI to explain it. Yeah, that's I think yeah, AI can be your partner, your coworker, your co-pilot for sure.
Shout out to
So
Microsoft.
if you had to, you had to say in one, like, how would you rate the book? Like, with that said, like, what would you give it as a rating with all that?
Hmm. I would give it like 4 pie charts out of 5.
Yeah, it's hard to, again, I like, yeah, using the pie chart example, like, again, in what context? Like, even that question, right? Like, oh, what would you rate it? Like, it did, but did I say, what would you rate it in every book you ever read? Or just nonfiction? You know, like, is it better than Alchemized? Is it better than Manacled?
Absolutely
But,
not.
or But is it better than maybe your stats textbook or like Freakonomics or another in that category, right? Like, is it a better business book or is it, yeah, again, see, this is how we give assign a number arbitrarily. Oh, this is the best book ever written for this specific topic,
Why?
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Based on where you are in your life right
yeah.
now, based
Where
on
are
your
in life? Yeah,
interests, based
definitely.
on who you are. So even take my recommendation or my what is my rating with a grain of salt. But
Yeah,
okay, but here's why. Okay, like a good statistic always comes with backup. So I think why I give it a 4 pie charts out of 5 is I think it's a really easy to read book.
yeah.
Like I think that for a lot of individuals who would not read the book, and this is my critique. I didn't get into my critique before, but I think my critique is that it's such a good book, but the cover of the book doesn't speak to what's actually inside the book, in my opinion. Like, I don't think that people realize that it's like really just this interesting way to approach like understanding statistics in like data and news and things like that. And so I feel like, maybe the cover, like just like even just the cover change would probably be good. But I thought it was a really great, like I loved the amount of examples that he had and the varied examples, and that he had examples on both sides of every story, and that he just kept reinforcing the rules that he was trying to teach you throughout the book. So it's to the end of it, I feel like even in this conversation, we've been like questioning each other and wondering things and like rethinking the way that we would approach work and life and our families. And so, yeah, really, really good book, especially considering it's nonfiction, and it is a hassle to get me to read nonfiction. Literally, our book club, our everyday data book club is going to be the place that I read nonfiction.
And so on what you just said, I had to look up real quick. What do you think of the? I don't know if you saw this when you were researching it. What do you think of the original title of the book? So to piggyback what you just said, the original title for this book was "How to Make the World Add Up." So I think he rebranded it to be the Data Detective,
Oh,
which is a little more flashy, you know. But I think the original title, maybe, yeah, like again, we were talking, you were talking about numbers and like, oh, for as a headline, but "How to Make the World Up Add Up," I think is a interesting, and I think it speaks maybe to the heart of what he is trying to say.
yes, I actually prefer that now that I've read the book.
But would you
Like,
have picked it up if it was that was the title versus
no,
Detective? Yeah.
no, probably not. So it's tricky. I don't know what the answer is.
Good
What's your
marketing.
rating?
Yeah, no, I think how many books? So I would probably give it similar, like maybe like a 3.5, but again, it's what's the criteria, right? Like I think it was I almost like exactly what you just said. I think it was a good refresher. It's something that I'm going to internalize a bit, but it wasn't like world-changing views that I didn't finish it and be like, "Oh man, that was like a five-star fantasy or sci-fi book where it's like, "Oh man, that was just amazing." I don't know if any business book or personal development book is really like, yes, that was like a masterpiece of literary. So I think from for its category, it's always going to be like in the 3, 4 range, but it's definitely better than average. And then my like kind of scale, like 3 is like middle of the road, is decent read. It wasn't like mind blowing, but it's definitely above that. So yeah, 3.5 pie charts, 4 pie charts. It was a
Yeah.
solid read, and maybe I'd bump it up to a 4 because again, the conciseness. It's actually a
Yes.
really well written book. I think you talked about it earlier already, was the chapters are really short. They're easy to understand. So my like maybe parallels. So if you like Freakonomics, or you've never even heard of Freakonomics, you like stories or Tipping Point. If you like Malcolm Gladwell, like this is a book for someone who likes to understand the world a little bit differently because he gives so many great examples framed from like an economist view and numbers, but like real world examples that you can really relate to. So I think the writing maybe would push it up to a 4. You can definitely tell he's a writer, right? He writes.
Oh yeah, he writes
Yeah.
beautifully. He makes such complex like topics. He just
Yeah.
compare like puts them out in a couple sentences. And I wanted to show you Malcolm Gladwell has a
Oh,
like that's literally a quote from Malcolm Gladwell
if
at
you
the
like
top.
Gladwell, you like
Yeah, he
Novik.
says he's a genius at telling stories that illuminate our world.
That's high praise. Malcolm Gladwell, like I remember the recent one, Revenge of the Tipping Point. Yeah, Tipping Points is it's also a very interesting statistical kind of way to look at, I guess, news or like challenge your assumptions through stories, I guess you could say. What this book does, I think, as well, but also gives you the tools to not just challenge the assumptions, but to understand why it matters, right? To challenge them in a certain way.
Okay, love that. Okay, so I guess let's wrap it up here.
Yep.
So we want to know if you read the book, what's your rating, right? And what rules stood out to you?
And also, what should be our next Everyday Data Book Club book? Should it be data? Should it be AI? I feel like we're always talking AI.
I know.
That's because of the hot topic. Yeah, there's so many books right now. Yeah, just be like browsing this book on Goodreads. There's so many books, on data, on statistics, on economists. It is a sea of books. So you got to have a catchy title to stand out, right? Like the Data Detective.
So maybe we should do something like, if we read all these books, do we recommend someone else to read it?
Yeah.
Like, would you recommend this book?
Yes, 100%. So I was talking about this to my wife, and who's a PhD researcher, and she's going to read it. So because it's
Okay.
very interesting. It's I think it's even for her who deals with data, statistics, academia, writing papers. It's a good just refresher to look at the world differently.
I completely agree. I'm gonna share it with the people in my life and really encourage them to read it. Like, I think it's a good book. It's easy to read, and man, it's really good. So yeah, it's like it kind of took me a while to get into it, but once I was like, oh, this is good. So definitely recommend. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.